Hi, this is Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and welcome to our April Fat Quarter Club. And you know, spring is coming. They say it's kind of cold here today, but summer will then be around the corner, and all I can think about is getting out and exploring the great outdoors. So we're calling this month's project When Critters Camp. And what it is a little 3D applique simple mini quilt or a placemat or an activity thing for a little kid. So I hope you enjoy making this. This video is short because it doesn't take very long to put one of these together. So you might want to make a couple. And I also am giving you links to the fabric in case you want to add more and make like a little playmat for an infant, a baby, or, the adult kid in you. So let's go ahead and hit it and get started. Well, I hope you enjoy this month's project. It was really fun to make it, and I hope that you'll also know that you can interpret these instructions however you like, and I want you to really have the freedom to put whatever little designs you want on this based on our fat quarters and position the animals wherever you like and all of those things, because this is just a very intro to a collage, actually. So our project is this cute little camper with the little three-dimensional flaps for the tent that unveil some little musical crickets. Then there's a deer and a bear, and I also have a chipmunk in there and the moon. And the instructions are like you're watching on our YouTube channel, but I'm going through this presentation deck that's in the description of the video. So don't forget to download this so that you can have the cutting instructions and things like that. The fabrics that you're going to get in this month's collection of fat quarters are mostly from Heather Ross's Forestburg collection, but there's also one pure solid in mint there for you. And other supplies, you're going to need about 13 inches by 18 inches of scrap batting, a half a yard of fusible web. I used Heat and Bond Light. Thread, the Cerulean for quilting. It's thin, and because we're quilting and appliquing at the same time, this thread will allow you to kind of stitch over it several times without being too thick. I did my applique with Isocord in a dark charcoal color. And then just to sew the pieces on the sides, the border, I used a 50 weight cotton, and I also used this to join the binding and to sew the binding on. You're going to need some sharp scissors for easily fussy cutting from your fabrics. A 505 glue stick is really helpful, and obviously an iron, rotary cutter, mat, and ruler, and printer with paper because you're actually going to be downloading templates for the tent. And those templates you can download right here in the handout. You see download templates here. You can just click on that and you can print them. And you're going to follow the instructions that are on the template. For instance, there is the little tent fabric that is meant to be cut with the stripe. You're going to cut one of stripe, one of fusible web. You can see it right down there. You're also going to be tracing the templates onto the paper side of the fusible web. And, it's important to know the difference between cutting something at face value and mirroring it. And we printed our patterns out and then we cut them so that it was easy to do this. For instance, with our stripe fabric, we want our tent to be, the opening to be on the left. So when I cut and traced my tent template, I actually turned it with the words upside down because when this stuff goes on the fusible web, you need to mirror it. I also kind of drew makeshift lines on my tent fabric so I could make sure I got the stripes of my tent going the way that I wanted, because initially I had them going horizontally and I didn't like that very much. So I went ahead and made sure that I told my brain which direction the stripes needed to go when I cut it out. Now, as for the second page of your templates, it's for your tent flap. And because this is three-dimensional, we're going to need to have tent fabric on the outside, and then I'm using the firefly fabric on the backside. And the way that these are going to be cut is from the stripe fabric, you're going to cut one standard, then you're going to turn the template over and cut another one mirrored. Then you're going to do the exact same with the firefly fabric. Then you're going to take those sets and stitch them together. And you're just going to stitch the right angle portion of the tent flap and leave the other side open for turning. So let's talk a little bit about fussy cutting. So not only did I fussy cut the tent fabric, but I also fussy cut the little grasshoppers that are playing music in the middle. So I just ironed the fusible web onto the back of wrong side of that fabric, and then used my template, and I actually traced it around just to make sure that I got it where I wanted the crickets to be, and then I cut on my tracing line, and that way I was able to hide them inside the tent. I also cut our orange background green clover fussy cut style because I cut like this 4-inch by 12.5-inch strip. And then I just kind of found a little path around the clovers and cut those out so I would have like a little foliage-filled border at the top and bottom of my piece. And then as far as the fabric with the little critters on it goes, well, cut as many of those as you would like. I cut a deer and a bear and a chipmunk from the pink background fabric with the animals on it. And then I additionally cut a moon from the same fabric that I cut the grasshoppers from. From the remainder of the clover fabric, for the sides, you're going to need 2 3-inch by 12.5-inch strips, and then cut as many long pieces as you can to do your binding. I'm not giving you binding instructions in this video, but I did cut my binding strips 2 1/4 inches by width of the fat quarter to as much as I possibly could. And then the mint fabric, you're going to need to cut a 13-inch square, but it is going to be trimmed down after you position all your little bits. And then the remainder of the lightning bug fabric, we need one 14-inch by 18-inch piece for the backing. And for the assembly, super easy. Like I mentioned earlier, you're just going to stitch the right angle portion of the tent flap and leave the other side open for turning. And I like to clip my little corners so that I can get a nice little point, turn, and press. So for assembly, start with taking the 13-inch square and kind of placing your striped outer tent with the fusible web and your triangle piece that is the inside of the tent with the little critters. And you're going to kind of place those so they will eventually look centered on your square. But before you actually fuse anything down, you're going to want to tuck the right tent flat piece under that main tent piece. And before you go to the ironing board to fuse anything down, you want to remember to remove the protective paper layer from the fusible web. And it might take a little finessing to tuck this little flap under the fusible web. Don't fret too much because ultimately when we open this little curtain, for lack of a better word, it's going to hide some of this. But you want to take the time, if you do need to trim some of your pieces just to make them fit, that's fine. But take a little time to finesse this just a little bit. And then magically you press, and that's going to adhere your fusible web down. So you're going to want to fiddle a little bit with that left side of the tent piece, tucking in the raw edges. It just takes like a minute, but take it over to the iron and get a nice crease on it. Then audition it along with your other tent piece because you want to just make sure that it lines up and it's to your liking. And I mean, how could it not be to your liking? There are crickets playing musical instruments inside this tent. Then we're going to place a heavyweight tearaway stabilizer piece under the background fabric so that we have some oomph to this when we do our blanket stitching. And we're going to set up our machine to do a single blanket stitch depending on the model of Bernina you have, it's either stitch 1329 or stitch 1309. And you're going to adjust the stitch to your liking. I like to do 3mm stitch width and 3mm stitch length with the needle position all the way to the right. And applique around the main tent, and then also the bottom and the left side of the triangle with the little critters on it. For the piece that has the little tuck under it, that has your flap, you can either sew that down with a blanket stitch, but I actually stitched it with just a straight stitch because nobody's going to see it, really. So after you've completed that, you're going to go back to your blanket stitch, and you're going to add the left tent flap into position using that blanket stitch to close up that opening where you tucked your raw edges. And then once the tent's in place, you're going to be creative and figure out how you want to place your little critters around the tent. I started with adding my top and bottom borders. Then once I kind of like figured out where I got those and where I like them, I took my pieces that I cut out and I kind of tucked them around until I got a composition that I liked. And then I trimmed my block to 12.5 inches square and added my side pieces out of the extra clover fabric using a 1/4 inch seam. And finally, I sandwiched my pieces together with my backing, my batting, and this top. And I found a foot that I kind of overlook every once in a while. I set my machine up for a number 1 straight stitch with the feed dogs dropped, but I'm using foot number 24 this month. It's open toe, so you can see where you're going. And for long armors, the foot number 24 is sometimes a less expensive option than the number 73 adjustable open toe foot. But also by watching this video, if you don't have the number 24 foot, you can get 25% off the 24 foot. Simply use code 25 off 24 in your checkout under your checkout code, and you'll get 25% off the 24 foot. You could also use the stitch regulator if you wanted. Now, this was the fun part, was just free motioning the applique pieces around. So all of these fussy cut pieces, I just doodled my way around, holding everything down. If you want to kind of stitch the details of the little animals, that's fine. You can go around the tent. I actually quilted in the stripes of the tent as well. And I even used my free motion very discreetly to tack down the little corners of the tent so it remained open. To finish, it needed just a little bit more quilting, so I just did like a loopity-loop design in the background on that mint background fabric. I took a little time to just stitch the quilt together before I put the binding on along the edges. And then I just used my favorite binding method. I sewed it to the back, brought it around to the front, and then top stitched. And don't forget, if you want to see how to do a binding, well, you can check out last month's Fat Quarter project where I bound the table runner. Well, was I right? Was it not short and sweet and to the point? And did you learn something? I hope you did. And don't forget that it's never too late to sign up for the Fat Quarter Club. I mean, quite frankly, it's a club that you can join month by month, because what happens is you sign up once and then you get an invoice at the beginning of the month. And if you don't want to make the project, or you just got too many irons in the fire that month, well, you don't have to buy it. So it's a low commitment club. All right, well, if you want to see other videos, tutorials, and all those good things, don't forget to check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Now, go camping. Or stay inside. I'm going to stay inside.